And Onselin, good morning to you.
G'day, John. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, because this week we've had the ABS releasing data which did break all records with very, very large numbers of people coming in. The biggest number in history. I guess we're growing, so in absolute terms that's going to be the case, given we're having this big surge. But then there's the question of how do you turn the tap on? Let's look at the numbers first.
Yeah, mate. Look, the immigration numbers just keep smashing records. So last week, listeners might remember that the Australian Bureau of Statistics released permanent long-term net arrivals data for February, and that smashed all records on a monthly, quarterly and annual basis. So we had 105,500 net permanent and long-term arrivals in February, which was just over the month, which is absolutely astonishing numbers, bigger than anything we've ever seen before in history. This week, the Department of Home Affairs released data on the number of temporary visa holders in Australia to March. So we had February last week, and then this is just temporary visa holders to March, and that also smashed records. So the total number of temporary visas in the country, if you exclude visitors, grew by 309,000 over the year to 2.42 million. So we've got 2.42 million temporary visa holders in Australia right now, if you exclude visitors, and that's up 460,000 from the pre-pandemic peak in March 2019. So, we're up almost 500,000 temporary migrants on the pre-pandemic peak. And the numbers are so extraordinary that it means that roughly 1 in every 11 people in Australia in March were on a temporary visa, which is just extraordinary volumes. And you might remember that the Albanese government said that they want to, we've got way too many temporary visa holders in the country. They want to bring the numbers down, etc. Well, this data suggests that it's growing and it's bigger than it's ever been, and it's up nearly 500,000 from the pre-pandemic peak. So, these are extraordinary numbers. And of course, the boom in temporary visas has been led by the international students. So we had 671,000 temporary student visa holders in the country in March, which is up 60,000 from the pre-pandemic peak. And we've also got another 200,000 temporary graduate visas, which is roughly doubled over the pandemic. It was about 100,000 pre-pandemic. And so what this means, if you combine those two, which is 860,000 temporary students or temporary graduates, roughly 1 in every 30 people in Australia is now either a current international student or on a graduate visa. So that's smashed records, and it's just enormous numbers. And what it basically means is that the federal government in December forecast that Australia's net overseas migration would fall to 375,000 this financial year. Well, based on the latest data from both the ABS and the Department of Home Affairs, we're still tracking near record, if not near record levels of net overseas migration. And the latest official figure we've got on that came out last month for September last year. So it runs about 6 months behind, and we had just under 550,000 in the year to September. So based on this data, we're still running roughly at, over 500,000, whatever that is. It could be slightly above 550, might be around about 500, but either way, it's smashing the federal government's forecast they had in December, and immigration's still running red hot. And what it means is that obviously this rental crisis that we're experiencing is just going to keep continuing, because we're bringing in people much quicker, much faster than we can build houses for them.
Because when we talk about there's a number that's set for humanitarian entry and I guess the extent to which you might have skilled migrants and the like, but where you have the temporary visa holders and the student visas, it just sounds like there's not a lot of control, and it sounds like how do you turn the tap off? Would these people are people who applied a long time ago? You've got universities and colleges who are facilitating all of this. Is there any control over this? Is there anyone in Canberra with a whiteboard that can see when they're coming and where they're coming from, or is it just so random that no one's got any control?
Yeah, it does make you wonder that, doesn't it? Because the federal government has, for the last, since they got into office, they kept projecting net overseas migration numbers, and every time a few months later, the actual numbers end up blowing that out of the water. So they ramped up their projections, and then it keeps getting higher. So when they first got in, they said we'd have 220,000 net overseas migration for the year. Then they upped it to 300,000. Then it became 400,000. And now, then obviously we hit 550. And then, so the numbers keep coming in way higher than what the federal government projects. And effectively it gets down to, the problem is that the temporary visa system is uncapped. So we have effectively two systems in Australia. We've got a permanent migrant intake, which is capped at about 213,000.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, if you include humanitarians and some other stuff.
Yeah.
That figure is capped, and the Albanese government did increase that by about 40,000 if you count humanitarians as well. As soon as they got elected, so they have increased that significantly. The bigger area where we're getting the massive numbers from is from the temporary visa system, which is actually uncapped. So there is no fixed number on that. And what the government's trying to do now is just trying to sort of tighten eligibility around student visas to try and bring those numbers down. But based on the data we've got to date, it hasn't worked because we've still got numbers growing hand over fist, and we're still doing record numbers. So effectively, they need to bring some sort of caps onto the temporary migration system because it's an uncapped system. And as a result, we've got 2.4 million temporary visas in the country, temporary visa holders, which is nearly 500,000 more than we had at the pre-pandemic peak. So the numbers are just ballooned out. And that's one of the reasons why this net overseas migration is so high.
Yeah, and a lot of those, would they be made up of different industries that are trying to get those people in to do some of the work for them, but not taking into account where they're going to live?
Yeah, absolutely. So effectively, every class of visa, temporary visa, experienced record numbers except for bridging visas, which are still going up, but they're down slightly from the pandemic because we had to, do a lot of temporary measures during the pandemic to allow people to stay. But effectively, employment visas, working holiday maker visas, student visas, across the board, the numbers are at record highs. So the government's basically just, let them in. And listeners might recall that the Albanese government, came to office with this fake 1 million visa backlog story. So they said, I've got this 1 million visa backlog and we're going to clear that backlog. And they spent 42 million people, hired about an extra 600 people in the Department of Home Affairs to basically rubber stamp visas. And as a result, they've approved an astronomical number of visas, and that's why the numbers have gone through the roof. So it has been deliberate by the federal government. Unfortunately, there's been zero consideration about where these people are going to live. And they've done it into a supply-constrained housing market because of the pandemic. We've obviously got high interest rates. We've got building material costs have risen by about 40% over the pandemic. We've got builders now competing for labour against infrastructure projects. So as a result, the supply side of the housing market's constrained, and construction activities collapsed to about a 10-year low at the same time as the federal government has deliberately brought in record numbers of people. So as a result, we have a rental crisis. It's pretty basic now.
Yeah, all right. Well, those numbers just feed into this ongoing story. And no surprise, the poll this morning showing there's significant numbers of people, particularly younger people, who would like to see something done because they can see the effect it's having on rents and housing. The other story round is this work done by the OECD showing the average tax rate in Australia increased by 7.6% in the last financial year, the largest out of the 38 countries in the OECD, the more developed countries. It just reinforces, doesn't it, that even though we had the GST brought in by John Howard, it wasn't a pure GST, and we're still relying far too much on income tax.
Yeah, look, Australia is way too reliant on income tax. And the problem with it is we've obviously got an ageing population, so we're going to have less workers as a share of the economy. And so effectively, and also the other taxes that we have, like fuel excises and GST, etc., those are actually diminishing tax bases, because obviously we're getting less in fuel excises. We go to electric vehicles and cars become more efficient, etc. The GST pie is actually shrinking in a relative sense because the fastest growing areas of expenditure like health and education are excluded from the GST. So what it basically means is that Australia is becoming more and more reliant on personal income taxes, which is one of the reasons why the federal government loves big migration, because it sees it as a way to just bring in more taxpayers, when really we should be not doing that and broadening the tax base to other areas. But this OECD research showed that Australia's experienced the biggest rise in personal income taxes in the world. Yep. And that's effectively because of bracket creep and also the ending of the lower middle income tax offset. There's a broader story here, John. Australia's real per capita household disposable income fell by 6% last calendar year, and that was the biggest fall in the world. And that fell for basically three reasons. So firstly, we've obviously had the big rise in tax that we just discussed, which has drained disposable income. Surprisingly, that rise in tax came despite the fact that Australia's wage growth was actually lower than just about everywhere else. So we've underperformed on wages. And the third area that's really hitting households hard is that Australia has one of the world's highest exposure to variable rate mortgages in the world. So just about all mortgage holders in Australia have variable rate mortgages, whereas overseas fixed rates are way more common. And what this has meant is that as the Reserve Banks increase interest rates, those interest rates have been passed on to Australians far quicker than interest rates rises overseas have been passed on to their borrowers. And what it's meant is that Australia has suffered the biggest rise in mortgage interest repayments in the world, on top of the biggest rise in tax and weaker wage growth. And the combined combination of those is we've experienced the biggest fall in household income in the world last year. So it's just another story of Australian households getting absolutely smashed and copping in the neck compared to their overseas counterparts.
If you went up to any politician in Canberra, senior politician from both sides, wouldn't you go up to them and you've said to them privately, wouldn't we be better off having a broad-based, slightly higher GST right across the board so we could lower income taxes, get rid of things like stamp duty, payroll tax? Wouldn't they all say, yeah, sure, but we can't do it because the other side would run a scare campaign? Isn't that the truth? They all know it's a good idea, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Look, Australia needs to broaden the tax base, not just GST. I mean, the GST should probably go up to 15% and get rid of all exclusions. But not just that. I mean, we undertax our resources. So, Australia is resource rich. We export 80% of our gas, for example, overseas. We've got massive coal and iron ore exports, but we don't tax them properly. And as a result, Australia's got this bizarre situation where we're paying some of the highest energy prices in the world, despite the fact that we export. We're one of the world's biggest energy exporters. It's back to front. We don't collect enough tax.
No.
And, we could copy Norway, for example, which does collect its tax. So, for example, Norway's got a massive gas and oil sector, not as big as ours, but 80% of the profits in Norway's, oil and gas industry goes to Norwegians. Right? So they've got an effective tax rate of about 80%. And they've got a massive sovereign wealth fund that is worth $250,000 per resident. Australia, by contrast, we collect a pittance in taxes from our resource base. And as a result, we don't have really anything to show for it. And it's just left us highly reliant on personal income taxes. So I think we can do a whole lot of things better. We could tax consumption better. We could tax our resources. We could copy Norway, not necessarily go the full hog, but just collect more of it, and then we'd be less reliant on personal income taxes, and we could have a much broader tax base.
Well, Leith, with I think the likelihood of a hung parliament at the next election, none of that's going to happen. But we can talk about it, I guess. Thank you so much, Leith Onselin with Treasury of Common Sense. He does it every Saturday morning around about this time.